IVF Real Talk.
I'm Lucy.
And I'm Yael. Welcome back, guys. Today we're joined by Claire. She's a senior psychologist and a team leader from Monash IVF in Melbourne.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Today we're talking about the emotional wellbeing of IVF patients, and Claire's going to guide us through it.
But before we do, Claire, would love to hand it over to you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in the IVF space.
I ended up in the IVF space. I actually did my very last placement, like my clinical placement when I was training for psychology at Monash IVF.
Wow.
And I had really wanted to get into this space. I loved the interface of like health and psychology, and I was, really keen just from having, I guess, some family and friends going through IVF. And at that time I was really keen to get into that space. So I was thrilled to get the placement there. And after the placement, just sort of rolled on and into employment there. And I've been at Monash IVF now 13 years, I think, since that placement. I think the area is so interesting, and the medicine is changing all the time, which, just to keep up with all of that, it kind of keeps you interested. But, really, I suppose my passion is helping people navigate that whole time, that whole system. It's such a stressful time for a lot of people. I feel like it's one of their first forays into the medical world, and just helping people kind of try and navigate that time and that system, is something that's really rewarding for me. Yeah. So that's where I've been. I think prior to that, I was prior to kind of training as a psychologist, I was in sort of more psychology research and medical education research and things like that. So I felt like, I sort of had a little bit of both areas, and it kind of married together once I got into that clinical placement. Yeah.
Do you still remember your first patient?
Absolutely. Definitely. Some of my first patients, particularly some of the people that I saw, over a number of years, and people that I saw through to success and having their families, and people that I saw through making a decision to end their treatment without having a baby. Both of those early patients really kind of shaped, my feelings, a lot of learning from them as well as they went through that.
Yeah, that's huge. That's tough.
We both didn't see a counsellor throughout our journey, even though we got offered to. So I think we really want to do this episode. We've been wanting to do this episode for a long time. I think so many people are afraid to utilise the counselling services. And I think this is going to be a good conversation to learn a bit about the insights and what we can actually get out of using these services. Because I think you're right. When you're going through the journey, it's so hard. It's so isolating. You're shutting down. You're not talking to anyone about it. And I feel like you do want to talk to someone. You do want to get it out, but it's ruling your whole life.
Yeah. It's so isolating and so hard, like you said, but there shouldn't be that shame and that fear to I look back and I think it links with the shame of doing IVF. So, but to have, like yourself, Claire, to be able to use the resources of the clinics is something, Lucy and I both think we should have done at the very beginning rather than a lot later on.
Yeah, I think it would have changed my journey a lot. I feel like doing this podcast, and we've spoken about this, has healed me in so many ways.
Yes.
I don't feel triggered to talk about IVF anymore, my journey. I don't get that emotional anymore.
Yeah.
But if I just had someone to talk to at the time, I feel like that would have been life-changing,
Yeah, the first time you and I did a separate podcast, which led us to this, we both shared our journeys, and it was the first thing we both said was how therapeutic it was and empowering to actually
verbalize it, get it out, unpack,
Had we have done it in real time, I think it would have had a much more significant impact.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
So should we jump into all of the questions?
Let's do it. Let's get the questions. I think people are going to really love this episode. They're going to get so much out of it. So let's just jump straight in.
Yeah. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let's do it. Why is emotional support such a critical part of fertility care, and why do some patients feel embarrassed to seek it?
I mean, I reckon I'll throw that second part of the question right back at the two of you. But the first part, why is it such a critical part of fertility care? I mean, this is inherently emotional, right?
Yeah.
Like from the very first time that people start thinking about having a family, like it's already emotional.
Yeah.
You know? And then depending on how you've come to IVF, some people come and they've always known they're going to have to come to an IVF clinic for treatment, right?
Yep.
And they come into it in a different frame, you know, or you come into it because you've tried to conceive for years, you've seen doctors, you've had tests, you've had this emotional roller coaster already, you know, and so this is already an inherently emotional space. You know, for a lot of people who are coming from that space of having tried to conceive naturally and it wasn't working, you know, this is a marathon. It is not a sprint, you know, and you've already, by the time you get to an IVF clinic, you've already been running a long time.
Yeah.
You know, and it is exhausting and taxing, you know, so it is not surprising that this is emotional. And I kind of think about counseling and thinking about your well-being really as those, like, you know, drink stations they have in a marathon. I'm not a marathon runner, by the way. But, you know, I kind of think of it in that way. You know, you can't keep going. You can't keep running at that pace without having some rest and some stops and some support and some other people cheering you on, or, you know, those types of things. And I kind of think it in that same vein. And I'll throw your question back at the two of you. You know, you said that counselling was offered. It was offered, but we didn't take it up. Like, you know.
Yeah.
What was that? And both of you kind of touched on shame there a little bit.
I think for me, I was in denial. Even when I went to IVF and the doctor said I needed to do IVF, I was still in denial and thought I shouldn't be here. So I think that was a part of it. But then also the shame, like I'm meant to be young and healthy. I go to the gym. I eat well. Why isn't this happening? I hid my journey. I couldn't talk about it. The shame just overtook me. Yeah. And it's not like me and my personality to be like that. So I don't understand why I was like that.
I had a different perspective because I had a miscarriage as my first pregnancy. That was kind of the start of my journey. And I kind of was sort of told, oh, you know, it's normal. It's your age. And I felt dismissed. So then I thought, well, okay, time's ticking, jump on. And I did exactly what you said. I was running that marathon without stopping for a drink because I felt the pressure. And yeah, it wasn't till maybe my second miscarriage that I stopped and actually needed support, and I needed to seek it. But at the beginning, I fell pregnant naturally our first try and had the miscarriage. So it was like that was our start. That was me running at the very beginning of the marathon. And I just didn't think I needed it. I just thought, okay, this is normal, they say, so keep going.
And so keep going, yeah. And I think, you know, we get so many messages, particularly around miscarriage, I think, so many messages that are very well intended, but are really harmful around there, you know. So, you know, lots of people will tell me, you know, oh, they told me it's great because it shows I can get pregnant. What a positive thing my miscarriage was, you know. It's like, you know, it's normal. It happens to so many people, except no one's telling you. No one's talking about it. Yeah. You know, but it's normal. And so if it's normal, you know, if this is a thing that happens to so many people, you know, then I should what? Suck it up.
Suck it up. That's right. That's how
going,
I felt.
You know, exactly as you said, and then move on to the next, you know, okay, start IVF. And then I think the other thing about IVF, and you touched on it already, but so many people have that sense of it pulls you in. You know, it's round after round, and there's this age ticking clock going on, you know, and you're just like, I haven't got time. I almost don't have time to process. I don't have I almost don't. And I think one of the barriers too is time and priorities, because, you know, the message is you've got to do this. You've got to do this while you're young, you know, get in there, do another round. And it's very hard to prioritize, I think, or it makes it feel more challenging to prioritize your mental health over this very physical health, physical focus, you know. So, you know, I need to focus on buying those medications. I need to focus on paying for that next round. I don't have infinite funds to pay for all these things, you know, and I'm already doing so many appointments. Like, how many appointments do you have to do? You know, I'm seeing the doctor, I'm seeing an acupuncturist, I'm seeing a dietitian, you know, like I'm doing all this stuff, so much stuff, right? So I think, you know, it's hard. It's almost hard to squeeze in the idea of counselling in amongst all of that. So I feel like that's a part of it. And I feel like for a lot of people, and you both kind of touched on it too, there's a sense of maybe there's denial, like I shouldn't even be here. But also I wonder too, like whether there's a sense of if I go to counselling and I seek out that support, it says, what does that say? What does that say? It says I'm not coping. It says that, you know, what I've been told is this miscarriage is normal and really common, and, you know, and then, but I'm needing help with that, you know, like there's all this sort of questioning of, I don't know, am I coping?
Yeah, that's so true.
Such a stigma that comes with seeking counselling or therapy or any of that, and it's not right.
I don't know about you, but I would always present to the IVF clinic in my best presentation. Is that weird? Because I wanted to look put together. Like I was coping and like,
yes,
you know, I've got this, I'm strong, I'm stable, but I wasn't.
I was a bag of mess. You and I are very different.
You had more clinic visits than me, so maybe that's why. But just on that, Claire, why do patients often underestimate how emotionally taxing IVF can be at the start?
Yeah.
I think, you know, we said before, you know, people come from different points. Maybe they've been trying to conceive a long time and they're used to the emotional roller coaster. They're used to the up and down. They're kind of, you know, you kind of get experienced in that, right? You know, when you're trying and it's not working. You're sort of used to it a little bit. And so you might go into it thinking, I've got this. You know, it's not going to be any different. But I often say to people, you know, IVF is different because this time we are going to know 100% for sure when that egg and sperm got together. We are going to know when an embryo goes back in the body, and hope goes up. Yeah. And if hope goes up, anxiety comes right along next to it. So the roller coaster that people have when they're trying naturally is an absolute roller coaster. I feel like when we get to IVF, it's the roller coaster is bigger, and naturally sometimes the low feels lower too, right? Yeah. And I think that's unexpected in some ways. I think that, you know, IVF treatment, we're telling people you're not going to feel sick. You're not ill, right? You're not sick. You're not ill. But you are having procedures, you are taking medication. Like these are all huge drainers on your resources. Your body is doing so much more work, right? Your emotions are doing the big roller coaster. So when you think about it, it's not surprising that this is hugely taxing.
Yeah.
You know, but I feel that when we come into something like this, we're not expecting that. You know, we're thinking, I got this, you know, or I've already been through the ringer, so I can deal with that, you know. Yeah. But it's a marathon and you've already been running a fair while by this stage.
And I think everyone says, that's exciting. You're doing IVF. Yes. How exciting. So you think, am I meant to be excited?
Yes.
You know,
that's it. That's
it's
right.
confusing. It's really
I feel
confusing.
like I was excited and had the shame at the same time. Like I was excited because I'm doing something.
Yeah.
But the shame of I'm doing IVF and I don't want to tell anyone was also there. But yeah, you're right. And also people tell you that's so good. You're going to do IVF. Awesome.
Right.
But,
yep. And there's a sense that IVF is going to work, except you are also, you're holding the uncertainty. You know, and you're right. I think that people do get excited, and there's this mixed bag of emotions because you are excited. You know, like you are excited, like, oh, okay, great. You know, this what we've been doing hasn't been working. We're going to get cracking on this now. We've got people on the job. We've got professionals. They're helping us out. So of course you're excited. Like of course you are. But hand in hand with that excitement is all of the experience that's come before and the anxiety, and you're trying to hold all of that at once. Like it is confusing.
So true. And it's also all of that, but then as your journey goes further in IVF and you're still getting that's exciting, you're doing IVF comment, you then get like angry.
Yeah,
like, no, this isn't fun. Yeah. First cycle was fun and exciting and it was unknown, but then once you know what you're doing, it's not like, and
that's so true.
Then you've got the anger in the emotion basket as well as all of the other.
Yeah. And don't tell me what my emotions are about.
Yes.
What are some of the most unexpected emotional struggles patients face during IVF?
And is isolation one of them? Because it definitely was very it was big for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really common one, the isolation, I think the shame that you were touching on, which often leads to the isolation as well. You know, I think the other one that I see that creeps up on people is grief.
Yeah.
It is compounded, often long-term grief that has been just piling up, you know. And sometimes I see people and they will be telling me, you know, I cry all the time and I just feel, you know, awful, and I keep thinking about the past and things that have happened and my, you know, vision for the future, and it's all not there anymore, you know. And sometimes I will say to them, we need to name what this is. This is grief, you know, and the realization that it is grief that's just been piling up, all of these losses, all of these times that you've tried without success, all of the other mini losses, you know, the idea that, I don't know, you know, if you're trying with a partner, the idea you could have tried and, you know, we had sex on our honeymoon and it worked. You know, you go from that to, okay, we're trying naturally, now we're really trying, like we're working at this, you know, and then people will move on to, and now it's very medicalized, you know. So what have we lost there? We've lost the spontaneity.
Yeah.
We've lost sex being like, you know, this fun thing that we would do. That's gone. My idea of peeing on a stick and getting, you know, the lines come up, that's gone too. You know, and now this very personal thing.
No, sorry.
And I'm too far away. I can't just pass you the dishes. But, you know, there's all of these little losses, and now I have to invite a bunch of strangers into what was our personal loving kind of journey and plan. So many points of grief and loss. And I think that they go, well, I feel like they go unacknowledged for such a long time into treatment. And I think I think that can be a really surprising thing for a lot of people, not in a good way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think a lot of the listeners will resonate with that. I feel like the way you articulate how we're feeling, you do it so well. Sometimes when you're in it, it's hard to articulate it.
Yeah,
I don't know, it just is.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you're not verbalizing it. So it's all in your head, up in your head, but you don't get the words out. So it's
you don't want to get the words out.
That's true.
And that's why, lots of techniques like, going to counselling is good. You get it out. Like, it's not rummaging around in the back of your head, sort of half-formed thoughts and feelings. That's why journaling can be good for some people, those types of things. I think the other surprising feeling that people can have during this is envy, jealousy.
Yeah. Definitely had jealousy. Yeah.
Those triggers,
And I hated myself for it. I think a lot of us, we talk about the jealousy in the community and we hate ourselves for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It comes with so much guilt as well. So, like, you're jealous and then you're feeling like shit for it.
Yeah, I'm a bad person. I cannot even verbalize the horrible things that I just thought about, maybe a random stranger pushing a pram, or, maybe someone I actually love dearly. And, there is a part of me that, of course, is happy for their joy, but it is completely overshadowed by my sadness. And, oftentimes I'm talking to people about those two things can be there together when we are constantly watching, people get what our hearts desire. Of course, we're going to feel like that. Completely normal, But I think, we can feel terrible about ourselves for that.
Do you think that's more the norm than not the norm? Like, do you think that jealousy, envy feeling is more common than not, and we don't want to go to the baby showers, we don't want to go to the gender reveals? Or do you think it's like 50-50? What do you see?
Oh, I think it's a completely normal feeling in this space, right? I think everyone would feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the choices to make, we do, you talked about isolation before. I often talk about like some healthy isolation. We need it to be balanced, right? Because you do have to make choices. You can't keep putting yourself in situations and like baby showers that are hurtful. You do not have the resources to keep doing that, right? So, making some healthy kind of boundaries and choices around that, like deciding, I'm not going to go to that baby shower.
Do your patients ever say, look, I have a baby shower with someone close to me, but I don't know what to say? Because I feel like there's going to be people listening and they're going to be like, what's a good excuse? Do I be honest with my friend? Because I think a lot of us, we're scared their friend's going to disown us or they're not going to get it. They're going to get angry at us. They're going to think we're just jealous and a bad friend and not supporting them. But it's too hard for us to go.
To keep going. Absolutely. And I think sometimes you might be able to gauge which friends and you try and it's important to gauge which friends do I think that I'm going to get some empathy and understanding with, and which ones of them am I perhaps not going to get that with. Yeah. And you most of the time you can probably get a pretty good guess at that. Sometimes we get it wrong. And so for the people where you feel like they're maybe not going to be that empathetic or there could be that type of reaction, I say, you got my permission to white lie it and get out of it.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I've got something going. I'm not coming.
Absolutely. Or, I'm so excited about your baby shower. Absolutely, I'll be there, on the day. Oh,
I'm sick.
Sore throat. I'm so sorry. I'm sending a present with so-and-so, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
Like,
white lie.
We need Claire in our corner.
This makes me feel good that we can lie and it's to protect ourselves and it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's okay. You need to give yourself permission to do that sometimes. And then with other people, like we said, where there's a bit of empathy, it might look more like, I haven't really talked about what I'm going through too much. But coming to those sorts of things is actually becoming really hard for me. I'd love to see you one-on-one another time. I really value our friendship, but being in that kind of space where everything's about the baby is just heartbreaking for me at the minute, and it's too much. and I hope you understand. But how can we connect in a different way, in a different format that isn't quite so much about that, you know?
I like that.
I like that because you're still supporting the friend, but also placing the boundary to protect yourself.
And you're not like, I feel like the isolation comes from just fully not going and like losing those connections. And I just chipped away slowly, was so busy with IVF and focused on that I just didn't have time for anyone. Like I chose not to have time because it was just easier than feeling miserable in that company. But had I have tackled it that way, I think it would have been better. Like just one-on-one time with certain people that you feel safe.
Yeah, certain people, exactly. And sometimes the one-on-one stops the conversation from being all about babies and pregnancy. You know, I feel like those group scenarios tend to lend themselves to that more. You know, where one-on-one, there might be some conversation about your friend's pregnancy or their child and those sorts of things, but it's easier to move the conversation on.
That's so true, especially when you're the only one that doesn't have a baby yet or the only one that isn't pregnant in a group of women.
Oh, 100%.
It just goes on and on and on, and it is painful.
Yeah, it does.
It's annoying.
And you just sit there. But I also think you sit there like you sit there uncomfortably not understanding, like an alien,
because you don't relate, you don't get it, you don't know the baby talk, you don't know, any of it.
There's none of this milestone crap that you know about. You're just like out of the loop.
Just feeds into that sense of isolation and difference, right?
So true. And I like the way you talked about grief as a whole when we're in this journey, because you're grieving everything, like you said. You're grieving the fact that you have to stop trying naturally to then go to IVF, or you're grieving failed cycles, or you're grieving a failed embryo transfer and or a miscarriage, and it just goes on, and it really does compound.
That would definitely resonate.
Even just the dream of how you would have planned it or when. Or
oh, yes. Imagine planning, Imagine planning. Imagine being like, we're going to have this baby then, and then we're going to have this much gap, but it's going to be exactly as I planned.
Yeah, we're going to have a summer baby.
Yeah, people say that. I'm going to have a summer baby, and they always do. And I'm like, it's annoying.
If I do it this month, then she'll be born on, such and such month. Or
Christmas Day. Let's plan for Christmas Day. I'm like, you're annoying.
Yeah. Imagine the luxury of planning like that and having it come to fruition.
Yeah, if only. So the next question, how does infertility affect a person's sense of self, and what can help them maintain self-worth during treatment?
I think that's a really good question. I think that IVF and all fertility treatments can be sort of all-consuming. And you can, get drawn, it draws you in, the round after round type of stuff. The idea that you can control this, that you can do, we get so many messages in our lives, right, that if you just work harder at something, you'll achieve it. If you want to change careers, you can do that. You might have to go study, but you can do it. If I want a new car, I just have to work hard and save, and I can get myself a new car if that's really what I want to do, But this area, you can do everything. You can do everything right, You can do it all, and it doesn't work, And there is an illusion. You get to IVF and, the doctors and the scientists, they can control so much.
Yeah.
But there's an illusion there, and it draws us in to think that we can control it all. And I think particularly for women, for people who are planning to have the embryo transfers or the insemination procedure done on them, there's a sense of responsibility then. I need to, maybe if I just ate that perfect diet, it would work. Maybe if I did the acupuncture and did all of those things exactly right, I remember talking to a patient, and she just had such a great analogy. She said it's like this huge, long combination lock, and we're just trying to come up with the exact combination of all of these things, And I think that a lot of people, get that sense of, I just have to do it. The right combo needs to come up, and there's so much responsibility. So you can get so drawn into it, and it becomes your whole life, this fertility treatment, and you are lost. The person who is the friend, the daughter, the sister, the, professional, what were you doing for your career? Some people are so concerned, like maybe it's the stress in my job. And so I'm going to give up my job and focus 100% on this because this is the time to do it. I've got this window to do it, and they lose all of those other aspects of their self, and it's easy to see how that happens, right? It's easy to see how you can get drawn into that. And so, oftentimes I'm talking to people about the benefits of work, of our other pursuits, of our hobbies and those sorts of things, trying to keep a balanced view on our lives, like doing other things, achieving in other areas of our lives. It might sound crazy, but, even people going through this, deciding to do some study on the side because I can achieve in that area and I can have that sense of achievement in that time. So trying to get the balance, because at the end of the day, there is a window for IVF treatment, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to make use of that window. You want to prioritize it. It does have to be a priority, but trying to work out aspects of your life that you can keep going in other kind of train tracks, if you know what I mean. I've got my IVF train track. I've got my work train track. I've got my, hobby train track, and there was that social element that we were talking about before, trying to keep that track going at the same time.
Okay, so we shouldn't isolate. We should still be doing the things, doing hobbies, doing the little things that bring us joy. Absolutely. That will sort of help us.
Little things little things that bring you joy, and little things that remind you of you.
Yeah, I lost myself 100% in the journey. And I look back and think, oh my God, like I was just so tunnel vision. Like you said, I had one track, IVF track, baby baking track, and that was it. Work was there. It was just like I was on autopilot. And you really can just be so consumed by all of the appointments, keeping up with, like you said, doing diets, trying to control it all when you can't control it all.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. And I wish I did a lot more of things that I used to do, because you then get a bit bitter and a bit upset at the end of who am I now?
Who am I now? And then comes the question, if this doesn't actually work.
I remember feeling like, and probably a lot of people can resonate with this, like I was on a treadmill.
Yes.
And the years were passing, but I was on pause, and people were having their first baby, their second baby, their third baby, and I still can't even get pregnant. What is happening? It's so frustrating. And I just couldn't understand. I was like stuck in the season of my life. And now I know it was a season, but at the time it felt like a lifetime, and it was never going to end. Was it going to end? And I think almost at times, and I think you've spoke about this before, sometimes you just want to jump off because it's just doing your head in.
Churning and burning is like, it's full on. And that's exactly how I used to describe it, a treadmill. I felt like I was on it. I also felt like I wasn't allowed to jump off too.
Yeah, I would have holidays and breaks, but wouldn't. Do you see patients that do a bit of both? Like some patients tap out, they won't do treatment for a couple of months, and other patients who would never do that, they just go months and months and months.
If I stopped, I
and what's the psychology behind that with the patient that just keeps going and the patient that takes a break?
Yeah, I mean, I see loads of people absolutely that are, I don't know if this resonates with you, but afraid to take a break.
100%. That was me.
If I stop even for a second, what does that mean? Trying to flex up some of that thinking, that all or nothing thinking, because, again, you get drawn into that all or nothing thinking. You get drawn into, I'm on this track, I'm on this treadmill, and I've got to keep going, I've got to keep going. The only way is to keep going, and trying to flex some of that up so that you can have a break. Maybe seeing the break as, like we were talking about before, the marathon, those stops, you got to, they stop, and have a drink and do these things. And then, and then other people absolutely will be more willing to take a break and see it as a break, not see it as the end, But I think we've all been in those phases of our lives in lots of different ways, I can't stop, I've got to keep going, we get stuck in that mode or on that treadmill, right?
Yeah, and I thought if I stopped, I would, I hit rock bottom on my journey, but I thought if I stopped that I would go to the darkest place. I just couldn't go there. So it was just keep going, and the next step helped me keep that hope that I'll get there. But for me, that was my reason.
Yeah.
But you took a good break, and that helped.
I think I just understood why. Claire, when you said people don't stop because they're afraid of stopping, I think the ones that do stop, like me, I had, it took me a year to go back to IVF. I think I was afraid of going back to IVF,
Yes.
So it's funny, we're both afraid.
Yeah.
You're afraid of stopping. I'm afraid of going again to fail again. So,
yes.
Yeah.
So it's fear. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that. Why put myself back in there? Why get back into that? And sometimes that can happen, and sometimes that's part of people's processes about deciding to stop, is taking breaks and sort of working out, where am I? Where am I in this? And, is it time to stop?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I eventually kind of build up my resilience again to get back in it?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
What guidance do you give patients who feel like they're not coping emotionally? It's a bit of a loaded question, isn't it?
I hear this all the time. I'm not coping. I go back to the definition of the word cope, right? It's dealing with something difficult. It's dealing with something challenging. And I feel like a lot of us thinks that coping looks like a happy person who's functioning at work and, is being a great partner, great daughter, great, friend, brother, whoever, doing all these things, probably volunteering at the same time.
Never not coping.
Baking. Just imagining this.
I'm just don't cope at all. Yeah. Baking, picket fence.
I think that's the picture that we paint, that coping, that's what coping looks like, right? Looks like this happy person who's functioning really well in all aspects of their life, but coping is dealing with something difficult. And I think dealing with something difficult looks messy, real messy.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like somebody maybe not doing their best at their job, maybe doing the minimum, the bare minimum. I'm scraping by at the moment, that's what that looks like. Or it might look like somebody who has little outbursts every now and then because, people say irritating things to them. Maybe you just need to relax.
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
And I've had it up to here with people's advice and comments, about that, right? It looks messy. It looks like somebody forgetting stuff, I'm forgetting things. I forgot the appointment and I forgot that and I forgot this and I'm turning up late and, to me, that's what coping looks like. Coping is messy, but I think we have this expectation that we're going to be able to go through this hugely challenging part of our life and an immense challenge, a huge stressor. We know it's a stressor going through this and that we're going to be well put together the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
No. That's weird. That would be weird.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think that's, I think that's my guidance for people is, let's look at this coping and let's look at what you're actually dealing with and doing. And I think you will find that you are absolutely coping.
Yeah, I love that. And I've never looked at it like that either.
It's just putting it into perspective, right? And giving yourself some grace rather than, expecting to have the honey cake in the oven and all your appointments in a row and
not forgetting anything.
House is perfectly
clean. House immaculate and everything else sorted.
Trigger shots on time. It's always on time.
Yep. I did it perfectly. Don't worry.
Just on that, what strategies can patients use to manage anxiety or even intrusive thoughts? And how does mindset influence resilience?
There's lots of parts to that question, isn't there? Intrusive thoughts, that's a real common one, and anxiety and intrusive thoughts, I think, come hand in hand. And anxiety loves to breed in the past and in the future. It likes to breathe in the what ifs of the future and the what if I had have done different things in the past. Yeah. And the antidote, I think, is that mindfulness, which is really about staying in the moment. But it can be really hard. Our minds just get drawn into maybe ruminating on the past decisions, past things that have happened, or going into the future. What if, I kind of think of it like a really busy train station with lots of trains coming in, and they're your thoughts. They're coming in and out of the train station, and you are standing on the platform. And it's normal. It's normal for these thoughts to come along. It's not abnormal. It's not abnormal to have thoughts of what if I hadn't done this, or, what if this doesn't work? What if this treatment doesn't work? That's normal. Of course, your brain's going to go there. Yeah. But what ends up unhelpful is when we get on the train and we ride it to the end of the track, So, and sometimes, I don't know about you, sometimes I choose to get on the train purposely. It's like I go, I'm going to really think about that horrible outcome that could possibly happen. I'm going to get on that train. I'm going to really think about it right to the end. Yeah. It's not helpful. That's not really helpful. Other times I find myself on the train, I don't remember getting on. I'm on it. I'm there.
Some days are like that.
Me. Yeah.
Right? So, and that mindfulness practice is really about going, okay, I'm on the train. This is an unhelpful train. I've got on this many times before. Thank you very much. I need to get myself back to the platform. I need to get back to the platform by focusing on something else in front of me. I'm going to acknowledge that thought tends to come around this time. Yes, I'm used to that. Other people, other examples, and these are all examples of thought diffusion, and so people can Google that, thought diffusion techniques, and they're really nifty. They're kind of simple, but they're really nifty, and even just talking, thanks, mind. Yep, we're going to that place where treatment doesn't work again. Unhelpful. I'm going to focus over here now. Thanks, mind. We're going back 10 years when I made certain decisions and da-da-da, and, what if I hadn't done that? Sliding door moments. Thanks, mind. I know where this ends. It's an unhelpful place. It's not helping me. I'm going to try and focus back here, So, some of these thought diffusion techniques, but you have to find the one that works for you. You can play around with them kind of thing. I think they can be really helpful. I think you mentioned a good word, resilience, the ability to kind of bounce back when you're faced with a challenge, right? This is, fertility treatments are a huge challenge. It's a massive challenge. So how do we bounce back, and I think one of those is you got to keep your fuel tank up. You can't bounce back if your fuel tank is constantly empty. How do I fill my fuel tank? Maybe it's what we were talking about before, hobbies, things like that. Maybe it's, hanging out with certain people who fill our fuel tank up. Some people are drainers. probably want to stay away from them a little bit more, that type of stuff. Giving yourself some grace. We talked about that before as well. Allowing space for some of these feelings. They don't feel so great, but we need to allow them some space, in our lives. This grief is not a great thing, but it's there. We probably need to acknowledge it and allow it some space in our life as well. I don't know if any of that resonates with the two of you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think so. And I like that you touched on grief and allowing it, because I think when I had my second miscarriage was when I stopped and thought, I actually need to not stick it under the rug and like forget it happened, and actually acknowledge it. And it wasn't until someone else told me to just stop and you can honour it. Whereas, yeah, you can just move on because you think you should. And
or you're told to.
With it. Yeah, or you're told to.
I think what really resonated with me was about the thoughts and all of the thoughts and getting on the train. And sometimes you want to get on the train, and I so resonate with that. I remember someone once told me, I heard it on a podcast, they said, if you're overthinking, and that's so IVF, you do overthink, or just TTC, just say to yourself, especially if it's at night before you need to go to sleep, there's nothing worse when you're tired and a thought comes and
you're on Google and going down rabbit holes. Yep.
So it so happens. But they said what you need to do is park that thought. I'm not going to allow myself to think about this thought. I'm going to make time for it in the morning at 10 a.m., but not now. And I love that. And I use that technique a few times, and I think it works well.
And then I guess when you wake up at 10 a.m., it's
You're
kind
busy
of done.
Anyway. Yeah.
So true.
It's common for partners to process IVF differently. How can couples support each other without conflict? This is a juicy one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I see, we see loads of couples come into the clinic and talk about this topic. And sometimes the stressor of IVF might be the very first real stressor on that relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So
and quite often they do, you know each other. You know each other really well, and you kind of know, they're different to me. And when things are going well, quite often those differences are lovely. They're complementary, I'm a planner. They're spontaneous, and that works really lovely together, right? It's so lovely. It all works perfectly. And then we have this external stressor, and all of a sudden one person goes into their coping mode, which might be planning, but like planning to the nth degree. And the other person is like, I can't do that. I take things one at a time. And you're planning 10 steps in advance, and it's making me really anxious, and I don't like it, and it's too much, And the other person is like, well, I like planning 10 steps in advance because it's making me feel better and there's control, right? And when you see those differences and, that in that way, it's very common that the stressor makes those differences that used to be kind of really helpful and complementary. Suddenly they're grating on one another. They're seemingly different, I talk to people, and some people, they want to, process what's happening to them and process that emotionally. And the other partner is, and quite often the partner that is not involved in the physical part of the treatment, they will often present as the person who wants to fix stuff. I want to fix it.
Yeah.
I want to fix stuff, except I can't fix this. So I'm going to leave them there with their emotions, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to fix things. I'm going to fix things around the house. I'm going to fix things in the shed.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
So true.
In the garage.
I'm fixing, and it makes me feel better to fix stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm a fixer. And normally I can fix stuff for her, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't fix things.
Yeah.
And what that then leads to oftentimes is that one party or both parties are feeling on different pages. You know, I'm wallowing on the couch, but somehow they're out doing things.
Yeah, they're coping.
How are they doing that? Yeah, they're coping, right? They're coping. I'm not. This is affecting me. Maybe it's because I really want this and they don't really want it. They're not as upset as me, right? But when I actually talk to them, when I talk to both parties, they are just as upset as each other. They're just coping in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you start talking about those different coping mechanisms, I can sort of see it now. I can see what's happening, you know. So oftentimes I think too, the counselling that people can do before treatment can be really helpful, because before that real stressor hits, acknowledging, how do each of us cope in stressful situations? It's different. Okay, how do we give the other person a little bit of what they need and get a little bit of what I need at the same time, you know? So how do we work out a way for the person who wants to fix stuff to be able to do a bit of that, but also not leave the other person feeling that they're left alone on a different page?
Claire, how often do you have both partners in for counselling? Because that's really interesting. I never thought of doing it together.
My husband definitely would not have tagged along with me, that's for sure.
So, I'm curious, how often do you get husband and wife or partners together for counselling?
So it's interesting. Here in Victoria, there is a legal requirement for couples to attend counselling before they start treatment.
All treatments, for all treatments.
All treatments.
That's good.
Oh.
Yeah. So I guess that's the lens I'm coming from. And you're absolutely right. Some people do not want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine dragging George and Luan to counselling?
No,
and it's required, and we haven't even started. I love this. I want to hear more.
I wish we could, though. Maybe we should make it mandatory.
Yeah. You know, and look, I'm a huge advocate for it myself, having seen exactly that, how wonderful some of those conversations are with couples. You know, that, you know, particularly, that maybe wouldn't have come.
Mm-hmm.
A wonderful opportunity to kind of look at strengths of the relationship, how you've come this far, because as we said, a lot of people have already run a marathon, done the roller coaster, and they've got great strategies going on, you know, within that couple. And how do we pick those up and go, fabulous, that's really working for you. How do we keep that going into the future? You know, what supports do you need in place? What hasn't been working? Oh, okay, yeah. We see these coping strategies grating against each other. Ooh, okay, let's have a look at that. You know, we get this unique opportunity to do that with couples. And it's, you know, I think it can be a really beneficial place to do that and kind of make a bit of a plan, and have both people perhaps, you know, understanding what it is that they're about to enter into a little bit better.
Yeah. And I like the lens of potentially starting counselling before going into fertility treatment, because, like you said, this is probably not everybody goes through infertility and IVF, and it's hard, and it could be long and stressful, and, you know, that stress you may have never seen your partner go through before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the coping, and like you said, it makes a lot of sense.
No, and a lot of us don't, do we? We don't know how we're going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The next question I think is a really good one, but how can patients navigate questions, advice, annoying opinions from friends, family without feeling guilty?
Yeah. This is a hard one. And, you know, I want to acknowledge that I think, you know, most of those comments, those questions, those advice comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
You know, quite often these are people that love you to bits.
Yeah.
And, you know, they do not want to see you hurting. They don't want to see you upset. They don't want to see you stressed. And so what do? They try and minimize it. It's okay. It's normal. don't worry about it. Happens to everybody. Moving on. Get excited. Don't be sad. Be excited. All
it
of
will
these,
happen.
yeah, positive. Just relax. Just relax. Go on a holiday. Relax. These types of things, and they come from this place. But what does it do? It minimizes your feelings, right? And it leaves you feeling maybe a little bit more isolated. So how to deal with that? I mean, first of all, got to have a bit of a vent. It's a great place to come for counselling.
You've probably heard it all.
Yeah. Come to a safe place like that that's not connected to anyone, in your life, and be like, this person said this thing to me. I can't believe they said it. It really upset me. I couldn't say, I didn't feel like I could say anything. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes it's like deer in the headlights, right? People say these things to you and it's like, I don't know. I don't even know how to respond, and those sorts of things. And it's also a great place to brainstorm your responses to this stuff. So I think having some pre-planned, pre-brainstormed responses to some of these types of questions and things that you feel comfortable, you can play around with it, maybe you can come up with the ones that you'd love to say but probably never would.
We've done that.
In the shower.
Absolutely. Yep. Totally, and find that support person that you can do that with, and be like, well, imagine if I said this, or imagine if I said that, and this, that, and the other. But you might want to also come up with some pre-rehearsed things or natural kind of things that you might be able to say, and the same with the incessant questioning. Where are things at? Have you got your result? What's going on? Thanks. I really appreciate your interest. I'm just in a space at the moment where I just really don't want to talk about it, but I'll come back to you when I do. So, coming up with those sorts of responses, or, you should relax, actually infertility is a physical issue. It's not about relaxing, those types of things, but having those rehearsed responses, I think, can be really empowering and feel less like you're the deer in headlights.
So can we say, Claire told us to say,
back off. No, just kidding.
That's right. Absolutely.
No, but the deer in headlights is such a good way to put it, because that's how I felt. And then the people pleaser in me would be like, yeah, I should be more positive, and yeah, I probably need to relax more, and I'd just buy into their shit, or I'd snap. It was one it depends what mood you got me in, but yeah, it was either that or absolutely
agreeing, like, oh yes, I think I think a lot of people will resonate with the people pleaser aspect of that, and the buy-in to it's my responsibility somehow.
So true.
I think there's so much misplaced self-responsibility around this, that as soon as people say things like that, you're like, yep, it probably is me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's probably because I didn't relax enough.
Yeah.
Whilst I'm on the treadmill.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some subtle signs that someone might be struggling emotionally more than they or others realise?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is reactiveness. When you are noticing that someone else or you yourself are becoming highly reactive to things, like those times where you kind of lose your mind, and then you'd look back and be like, oh, that was completely out of proportion. I just, completely out of proportion. I just blew it. It's like a pressure cooker to me. It's a pressure cooker that hasn't been allowed to let off any steam, and then it just starts coming out, anytime it likes. Comes out in weird places. I'm trying to be professional in my workplace, and suddenly, my professional facade is gone. That sort of emotional reactiveness, I think, is quite a common one that people are talking about. Like, I've been noticing that this has been happening and I can't seem to stop it. So a big one. And I think they're ones that, other people can see. You sort of said, how do you notice it in others? And I think that's another one. I think one that you both mentioned is the isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The isolating, and that becoming, more and more pervasive, and not sort of a discussed, planned isolation like we were talking before, where you might be, I am choosing not to go to this thing, but I know connection with that person is still important, so I'm going to try and organise some other way to connect with that person. I'm not going to go to their baby shower. Of course not. Don't do that. But I'm going to organise some other way, but it's the isolation where it's becoming pervasive and we can't kind of, it's overtaking. And I think the other one for me, that I think is quite common is sleep disturbance.
Yeah.
It's a kind of physical manifestation, isn't it? Either I can't get to sleep, I'm ruminating on things, or I can't stay asleep. I'm waking up really early thinking about, anxious.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, right. I think that sleep going off, your sleep being disturbed in some way is usually a red flag. And then we know that is like a bad cycle, right? Because then I didn't sleep very well, and then I went to work tired, and then I forgot stuff, and then, this happened, moody and grumpy, and then, all of those things just
Someone asked if I was pregnant and I lost it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or not even that big a trigger,
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. I noticed my stapler was missing from my desk and I lost it,
Yeah. Sometimes it's the really little things. You're so right.
True.
It is the little things that set us off and tears down our face, or you're even just watching a commercial and you start crying because
you drop something.
And you can't explain it because it's not you. It's not your personality.
So true.
It's just you're different now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you're right. And I think that's a thing too, is that like all of these things make people feel like they're not themselves. They stop recognizing, I don't recognize myself anymore because I am this bitter person who's reactive, who's got, who's lost friends, who, who's boring. That's the other one that people get to. They find themselves only on this IVF train and they can't really talk about that. And so then when people say, hey, what's happening with you? I got nothing. I'm boring. Yeah, I'm now a boring person. Who wants to be around that? Like all of these horrible kind of, cycles of thought that are going on.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah, it is.
So heavy. Such a struggle.
Okay, so the next question, we touched on this a little bit, but feelings like jealousy or resentment can arise and the lack of control is stressful. How can patients manage these emotions during IVF, and what does coping well actually look like? I know you touched on this a little bit.
I did, yeah. Was going to say coping well looks messy. It looks not pretty, looks not put together. It looks, like forgetting stuff. It looks like a little bit of reactivity as well. What else did you say before? It looks like crying over some TV commercial.
Yes.
It looks like all of those things. And all of those things that were mentioned, the jealousy, the resentment, that can come up, the anxiety, the lack of control. Lack of control is huge, really huge, and it's so challenging. The uncertainty that's kind of, hanging over people through fertility treatments, like, oof, it's really challenging. I think that for me, when people come and see me and talk about these things, the act of talking about it and clarifying those thoughts and hearing them for what they are sometimes, you know, and hearing somebody tell them this is normal. All of these feelings are normal. It's really common to feel all of those things that you're talking about. You are not going crazy. This is hard. This is really hard stuff, you know, and you don't have to keep pretending that it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
That's so true. And I feel like that was something you always talk about, and getting validated for not feeling like a bad person because you have these thoughts.
I would always feel like such a bad person, such a bad friend, because I'm not going to the baby shower. I'm having these thoughts. I don't want to see their bump. Like I would even, if I seen someone walking on the same side of the road as me and they were pregnant, I would go see the other side of the road because I couldn't face it. It was just so overwhelming and consuming. And then I would feel terrible for feeling like that, you know, but it is normal. And like you said, a lot of people are talking to you about this, having these conversations. I think because in society, you can't go out and say that.
Yeah.
Because people, I feel like they wouldn't maybe understand. That's how I felt. I couldn't explain it to people because they just wouldn't maybe get it, and they would maybe think I'm a bad person. I don't know.
Yeah. Whereas I felt like I was quite emotional and I would share, but then people didn't understand, and then I would be like, oh, okay. And then I wouldn't talk about it, you know. Yeah. Or I'd get frustrated. No, you don't understand. I can't do this, or I can't adopt, or I can't just, you know, and you get frustrated. So
and you're almost arguing your position, right? You know, and in the face of people saying, you should be excited about IVF. Isn't it fabulous? It's like, it's not fabulous. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing that, you know. And then they're like, oh, I don't know what to, you know. Of course you don't want to be doing this.
Yeah.
Excitement's not the only feeling you're having right now.
Yeah.
But it is. It's, you know, it can be so isolating. And I think it's really important what you're doing is having these conversations. And I see people when they see themselves reflected in someone else's experience, like how healing that is, you know, to hear this is normal. Oh my gosh, somebody else thought that horrible thought about a stranger whose pregnant belly was walking past that, you know, like
you're not alone.
You're not alone. Yeah. And I think that's one of the benefits of counselling, but it's not the only place to get that. Obviously, you know, podcasts like this are another place, you know, other people talking about their experience and normalising that is, you know, so healing.
Claire, for all the listeners that might be in the thick of it and needing to speak to someone, what's the best steps for them to take if they're in the midst of IVF, say, at a clinic?
Yeah. Well, every IVF clinic should have support counselling, some version of support counselling available. So probably one of the first steps would be to ask the clinic. You know, at Monash IVF, we run support counselling. We run a lovely breathwork webinar. We run support groups sometimes with different, you know, sort of different tailored groups and those sorts of things. And I would say a lot of the clinics would offer variations on that. So asking your clinic, there is, you know, if you're wanting to seek a private counsellor, you could look up the Australian and New Zealand Infertility Counsellors Association. So that's an association of counsellors that have experience in infertility counselling. And so you could find somebody, you know, closer to your local area kind of thing. And of course, going to see a GP and asking for a mental health care plan, another really, you know, important avenue, because they can absolutely give you a referral to see a private psychologist, and you can go there and suggest the one you want to see. So you can look up a psychologist or ask your clinic for one, and they will be able to, you know, suggest one as well. So absolutely I guess, lots of options. And then, of course, anybody, in real distress and it's out of hours and all of those sorts of things should think about Lifeline. It's free, confidential counselling 24/7, and that's 131114. So lots of options.
And we'll link everything in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put all the links in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Claire, for joining us today. I feel like you made all the counselling feel a lot less scary, a lot less intimidating,
good.
and more approachable. So anyone out there listening, I feel like even like you said, just before starting fertility treatment, utilise a counsellor and look into it. Definitely.
I think it's a great idea.
But thank you so much, Claire.
Thanks,
we appreciate it. I think that's a wrap on this week's episode. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next week.